Hey guys, today I'll be updating my prediction for the 2024 presidential election between the two most likely nominees. And of course, Joe Biden and Donald Trump have been the frontrunners for their parties over the last 3 years. Basically, since December of 2020, it's been Biden and it's been Trump in the Democratic and Republican parties. And if these two men are renominated, we will have the first identical rematch in a presidential election since 1956 between Adlai Stevenson and Dwight D. Eisenhower. So before we get onto this map, I'm going to take a look at the Republican numbers in terms of the primary race. Donald Trump currently has a pretty commanding lead. However, there are a whole field of candidates that are challenging him. This is not 2020. Donald Trump is no longer the president. He just lost the last election for Republicans, and a lot of people are unhappy about it. He is polling, though, at a very solid 55.4%, but that does mean that 45% of Republican voters do not want the last nominee to run again. Ron DeSantis was doing really well at the beginning of the year. January 21st, he peaked at 31.3%. But essentially, the more he's done since he's launched his campaign, the worse he is doing in the polls. And currently, Ron DeSantis only has support from 14% of his own party, while Vivek Ramaswamy is surging and is currently at 7.2%. Now, what I think is even more surprising is that Ramaswamy is now the second place candidate in the betting markets. People are putting more money on Ramaswamy than they are on DeSantis, somebody who is polling at 30% and is the governor of the third most populated state in the country. Donald Trump has a 60% chance at winning the nomination, and Ramaswamy is currently at 13.5. Ramaswamy is also the third most likely person to win the presidential election in general. When looking at this market here, Biden is at the top with a 35% chance at victory, Trump at 27, and Ramaswamy is at third. DeSantis doesn't even come in fourth, as Gavin Newsom has a higher chance at winning the presidential election than Ron DeSantis. Gavin Newsom, who isn't even in the race and will very likely not challenge Joe Biden, the party leader, unless something really unfortunate happens to him. In that case, Gavin Newsom, I think, would be the favorite alongside Kamala Harris. And so looking at basically all the numbers we're seeing on the Republican side, Donald Trump is pretty clearly the person to beat, and his lead really is very commanding. If you compare it to the one in 2016, at the very end of the campaign, Trump was polling at 46%, and Ted Cruz and John Kasich both had considerable support even until the very end. And at that point, Trump was only polling at 46.5. He does not need anywhere close to 100% of his own party to actually win the nomination. Not even a majority really is needed as long as other candidates split the vote. But as of right now, Trump being at 55.4% this early, it really is unprecedented. And Donald Trump, I think he will be very, very difficult to defeat. And honestly, it's going to be a bad thing for Republicans. Donald Trump is the worst nominee that they can put on the ballot next November against Joe Biden. If Republicans want to win the presidential election, they will need to choose somebody else, somebody more like Ramaswamy, Tim Scott, or even Nikki Haley. So looking back at this map, I'm going to start off with the solid states for both candidates. Joe Biden is going to sweep the West Coast. That's 74 electoral votes in and of itself. He's also going to have solid 15-point victories in Hawaii, Colorado, Illinois, and most of the upper Northeast, winning all of these New England states very, very easily, giving him a total of 191 electoral votes. Colorado voted for Biden by 14 points in 2020, and he's probably going to do just a little bit better this time. There really is not the same type of enthusiasm behind Trump. People don't really want him back as much as they wanted him in office and to stay in office even in 2020. People are tired of Trump's indictments. They're tired of his election loss complaining, and it really is defeating a lot of voters who simply don't want to turn out this time around when there are two candidates that are both equally disliked. However, Joe Biden, I think, will do a little bit better as the incumbent president. The incumbent always has an advantage going into an election, they have to be very, very unpopular for the challenger to have a better chance at winning. And so looking at this map right here, 191 electoral votes from the solid blue states alone. Joe Biden needs just less than 100 votes left to get to 270. So easily 191 is going to be in the blue column, while for Donald Trump, I simply don't see that type of enthusiasm behind him that we saw over the last 2 election cycles. And so I'm only going to be giving him 82 electoral votes from the solid red states. This is a 109 electoral vote margin for Biden already, just with the solid states filled in. Now, when looking at polling between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, Biden continues to do better and better. He is currently ahead by 2 points according to the RCP average. He is ahead by an even larger amount according to 538. And when looking at the latest polls, it's basically been Biden in the lead over the last month. If you look at polling from earlier this year, there was a lot more polls where Trump was leading, and so things have really started to change. Trump's indictments are making him not less popular among the Republican base, but among the general base and the nationwide population of voters, it is definitely not helping him. And now we're going to move on to the likely states. There are some very obvious ones for Trump. He might not win these states by over 15 points, but he's going to win them by double-digit margins, and the margins are going to be pretty close to 15. So the likely states are going to be states that are going to vote for either candidate by margins of between 5 and 15 points. So Montana, Kansas, Missouri, Indiana, South Carolina, and Alaska, all of these states are going to vote for Trump by more than 10 points, but they're going to just miss out on being solid. The margins are probably going to be around 12 to 14%. Iowa and Ohio are also going to be likely, but the margin is going to be under 10 points. Donald Trump has done very, very well in these 2 states over the last 2 election cycles. If you look back at 2012, these were both blue states, the same thing in 2008. And so the flip in 2016 has not been able to be reversed by Democrats. They ran Tim Ryan in Ohio against J.D. Vance, and J.D. Vance still easily won despite being the clear inferior candidate, and that was for the Senate race in 2022. So these 2 states are not going back to the left. Iowa and Ohio are firmly in the Republican column at this point, and so Donald Trump is now sitting at 148 electoral votes, 149 with the addition of the 2nd District of Maine. For Joe Biden, he's going to have some pretty easy victories in other states as well. The 2 most obvious ones are going to be New Mexico and Virginia, 5 and 13 electoral votes. He won both of these states by double-digit margins, not quite 15, and I don't think he's going to reach 15 in 2024, but there's still going to be states that Trump will not have a chance at contesting. We also have the at-large vote in Maine and the states of New Hampshire and Minnesota. This gives Joe Biden 225 electoral votes to Donald Trump's 149, with just the solid and likely states filled in on this map. And so what this means is that the 164 remaining electoral votes are going to be the ones that will decide the next presidential election. This is very similar to what we saw in 2020. We have the same candidates in a country that is more and more polarized. So the electoral map and the states that matter the most really aren't going to change too much from here on out. However, there are 2 states that, despite not being solid or likely, they will still go to Donald Trump, and it would honestly be a waste of time for Joe Biden to try to challenge. The point for Joe Biden is that he should go for the victory and not go for winning as many electoral votes as possible, because it's very unlikely he's going to fail. It's very likely he's going to fail in today's political climate. And so 2 states that Biden should not contest are both Texas and Florida. These are 2 states that Democrats poured millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, into winning for Joe Biden in 2020, and it simply did not happen. Democrats did worse in Florida in 2020 than they did in 2016, and Michael Bloomberg donated hundreds of millions to Biden to try to flip the Sunshine State, but it simply is not going to happen for them. And seeing Ron DeSantis' 20-point victory in the gubernatorial election in 2022, Democrats are essentially done for there over the next few years. However, Texas, it is shifting to the left, but it has not shifted enough. Donald Trump is still going to hold on to the state, but not by the greatest margin. He only won it by 5 points in 2020. You go back just to 2008 or even 2012, Mitt Romney wins Texas by 16 points. Texas is still red, but it's not as reliable as it once was, and Democrats like Beto O'Rourke and Joe Biden in 2020 are getting closer and closer to finally flipping the second largest state in the union, a state that has not voted blue on the presidential level since 1976 with the election of Jimmy Carter. And so we now have just 7 states left with the addition of the 2nd District of Nebraska, which I'm going to categorize as being lean Democratic. Joe Biden won it by around 7 points in 2020. And in 2024, the margin is going to be a little bit smaller. The district lines have moved since the 2020 census, and of course, with redistricting in 2020. And so the 2nd district is going to be a little bit different, but it's still likely to vote for the incumbent. And so when looking at the remaining states, Joe Biden does not need all of them to win. He really only needs Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, or he can take another route. He can lose in Wisconsin and carry either Arizona, Georgia, or North Carolina. But winning 2 states and Nevada is likely not to be enough. Nevada is a state that really hasn't shifted too much in either direction over the last few years. And so I think Democrats are going to have not the greatest time at winning this state, but Republicans, they're going to pour lots of money into it, but they will end up probably not succeeding. So Nevada is going to continue being lean Democratic. It went for Biden and Clinton by 2.4% exactly in the last 2 elections. However, we did see Steve Sisolak lose his re-election as governor in 2022, while Catherine Cortez Masto held on by less than 1%. In the upper Rust Belt, the 2 most obvious ones for Biden right now are Michigan and Pennsylvania. This will put Biden at 266 electoral votes. Both of these states voted for Biden by likely margins in 2020. And Biden is, of course, from Pennsylvania. He was born there. And Michigan is a state that's traditionally been more blue than both Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. In 2016, Trump was able to win the election by winning the upper Rust Belt, 3 states that were polling very favorably for Hillary Clinton up until Election Day. But Wisconsin was the one that Trump won by the largest margin, and it continues to be the most conservative out of the 3. And the final lean state on this map for Joe Biden is going to be Georgia. The Georgia interference into the election by Donald Trump after it, I think, is going to make him very unpopular there. Honestly, not too unpopular, but even a 1% difference is going to shift the rating. Biden won the state by around 0.25% last time. The margin, I do believe, can go up a little bit more. We just saw Raphael Warnock get reelected to the Senate, despite Brian Kemp winning. Georgia really does care who the candidate on the ballots are, and with a popular governor winning re-election as well as a popular senator of the other party, I think it's safe to say that despite Georgia being overall a redder state, Joe Biden will definitely have a very good shot at holding on to one of his key flips from the last race. And so these final 3 states are all going to be tilt states. These are states that are going to vote for either candidate by margins of less than 1%. And yes, with Georgia, Biden will cross 270 electoral votes. He's now at 282. Wisconsin is going to be the first one to go for the incumbent, 10 electoral votes. He's going to win it again. He won the state by a pretty narrow margin last time. The margin, I think, will go up a little bit, but Wisconsin is generally a little bit more conservative than its remaining upper Rust Belt neighbors, but it's still going to be a victory nonetheless. And with Arizona as well, Biden will cross 300 electoral votes. And yes, this map is very similar from the last one that we had. And once again, that's just because of how polarized our country has become, and people changing their minds on candidates of the opposite party is simply something that doesn't really happen much anymore. North Carolina, I will also be giving to Joe Biden at this point. He's polling pretty well against Donald Trump there, and with an unpopular challenger, I think Joe Biden has the potential to flip North Carolina, winning it as the Democratic nominee for the first time since Obama won it all the way back in 2008. And so this map will give Joe Biden 319 electoral votes, Donald Trump 219. This would be akin to a modern electoral landslide, a 100 electoral vote difference. You go back a few decades and this would be a pretty narrow finish. But as of right now, 319, even crossing 300, 310 electoral votes is pretty hard to do. The last time we saw a candidate really do well was Barack Obama all the way back in 2008. The last few elections have all been relatively closer, but with 319 electoral votes, Joe Biden is currently favored to win the next election, winning his second four-year term pretty comfortably and by a larger margin than he did in 2020. And so that will be it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Comment down below how you feel about this map. Do you think Trump has a chance at beating Biden next November? Like this video down below if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't, and I will see you guys in the next video.